From the opening pages of the Bible, we pick up that the God revealed in these scriptures has a strange sense of time. Like when we talk about a new day, we quite naturally and almost universally think of sunrise being a new day. Like the day has bookends: sunrise when activity starts, light comes in, noise, and then sunset, the time of stillness, silence, darkness. But God doesn't seem to see it this way. Like from the first page of Scripture, we see the 6 days of creation, and it was evening and morning the first day, and then it was evening and morning the second day, and so on. That he starts the day with evening, with night, with stillness, darkness, silence. Like I said, God has a strange sense of time, and we read this through the whole story of Scriptures. We kind of find this theme again and again, that God seems to have no regard for time as we do. So Abraham has to wait 100 years before God finally fulfills his promise to him, and Joseph spends nearly 2 decades in slavery and prison before he's finally elevated. And the Israelites, they have to wander in the wilderness for 40 years, and who knows? I mean, we've all experienced just waiting and waiting on God, that God is never in a rush. He's never worried about wasting time, and rather, he invites us into a completely different way of looking at time. Like the difference is so profound that in the Greek they actually have 2 words to describe time. One is chronos, which is the tick, tick, tick of the clock. It's busyness, it's billable hours, it's the way we usually think of time. And the other is kairos. And it isn't a measure of seconds, minutes, hours, but it's a measure of moments. It's not about how long something took, but about the weight of what just happened. Like how that moment became part of your story, part of God's story. So our world lives and dies by chronos, but God invites us into kairos, into sacred time, into a moment filled with meaning, a moment that connects our story to his story. And on this very day, 2,000 years ago, God's people gathered in Jerusalem to remember and reenact a moment just like this. 2,000 years ago today, God's people gathered to reenact that they had been slaves, but God had set them free by the blood of a lamb. That they had been slaves in Egypt under Pharaoh, the most powerful ruler in the world, that they were helpless, unable to save themselves, but God acted on behalf of them, and he saved them up out of Egypt through 10 plagues, famously conquering all the gods of Egypt. But with the 10th plague, he sent the angel of death to take every firstborn child in that nation. But if the Israelites, if they would just trust God and offer a lamb in the place of their sons, if they would slaughter the lamb and then take the blood of the lamb and paint it on the post and lintel of the doorway and enter into their house under the blood of the lamb and then eat the lamb, identifying with it, taking strength from it, then the angel of death would pass over their house and they would be saved. They would be set free by the blood of the lamb. This moment, that we were once slaves, but we've been set free, was marked in the sacred Passover meal practiced year after year from the time of Moses. And on this very day, 2,000 years ago, Jesus gathered his disciples to practice and take part of this very sacred moment, to take part of this Passover meal. But Jesus did do one thing that was odd. When in the normal tradition, when it came to the bread, he didn't recite the normal lines. Instead, he took the bread and broke it and said, "This is my body broken for you, given for you." And when he came to the cup, he said, "This cup is the new covenant, the new relationship in my blood." And with that, Jesus did something odd. He took this Passover, this event, this moment that signified that we were slaves and we've been set free, that God's people have been freed out of Egypt. And he said that this moment is about something more than you could even know. He reveals that this moment connects your story with the story of God. Jesus is saying that the Passover isn't just about how God saved people from slavery to Pharaoh. He says it's about me. It's about how I will save you from a deeper slavery. Slavery to sin, slavery to death, slavery to self, to fear, to hatred. It's about how I will pour out my blood to free you from the forces that you are helpless to overcome on your own. It's about how you were slaves, but I am going to set you free. This moment, this night, we find that the Passover story becomes our story. It's when God's great story of salvation becomes our story. That's what we remember this Thursday before Easter. That this is the night we know that we were once slaves, but we've been set free by the blood of the Lamb. And then after supper, Jesus explained that this great moment of salvation would begin with a betrayal. One of the 12 would betray him, and the 12 are sitting there, and they can't even imagine this could be possible. So they ask, who is this? And we read in the Gospel of John, chapter 13, Jesus answered, "It is the one to whom I give this piece of bread when I have dipped it in the dish." And then dipping the piece of bread, he gave it to Judas. And as soon as Judas took the bread, Satan entered into him. So Jesus told him, "What you're about to do, do it quickly." But no one at the meal understood why Jesus said this to him. Since Judas had the charge of money, some thought Jesus was telling him to buy what was needed for the festival or give something to the poor. And as soon as Judas had taken the bread, he went out, and it was night. And it was night. As soon as Judas betrayed him, the new day had begun. The day of salvation had come. The day in which Jesus' body would be broken and blood shed was finally here. The day in which we, who were slaves, would be set free by the blood of the Lamb.